real quick before we jump into today's episode. Let's talk about something so many writers struggle with: structure. You're knee-deep in your first draft. You're lost and overwhelmed. You're second-guessing everything you write. If that sounds familiar, I have a free 3-act worksheet just for you. It won't hand you a formula to follow. It'll help you see the story you're already telling so you can stop guessing and get back to the page. Grab it free at nancypanuccio.com/act. That's Nancy with an I, Panuccio with 2 C's, nancypanuccio.com/act. Okay, let's get to today's episode. The middle isn't just where the structure gets hard. It's where the emotional experience of writing gets hard too. And I don't think that's a coincidence. By the time you're in the middle, the initial excitement of a new idea has usually worn off. Writer Unleashed is for you, a writer who has the story you want to bring onto the page and into the hearts and minds of readers. I'm Nancy Panuccio, writer, editor, and book coach. Each week, we'll explore techniques, mindsets, and inspiration for writing stories readers can't put down. Thanks for spending some time with me today. Now, let's begin. I want to start today's episode a little differently. I'm going to read you some things writers have said to me over the years. Real words from real writers. No names, just what they told me in their own words about where they got stuck. I'm 70,000 words in, and I have zero idea where it's going. I know the beginning. I know how it ends. It's the in-between I'm having serious issues with. It's taken me 3 years to write this thing off and on, and now that I've come back to it, it feels like I'm trying to solve an alien Rubik's Cube. If any of that sounds like you, I want you to know something. It's the most common thing I hear. That alien Rubik's Cube feeling, it's not rare. The metaphor is original for sure, but the feeling behind it is the most common thing I hear writers struggling with. The middle, the muddy middle, the messy middle, the dreaded middle. I've heard writers call it a dozen different things, but it's always the same situation. The beginning came easily. You knew how to start. Maybe you even know where the story ends. But somewhere in between, the story stopped moving the way you thought it would. And suddenly you're asking, well, now what? What happens now? I hear this from brand new writers working on their first book, and I hear it from writers with several published books behind them. Every story you start is another Rubik's Cube. If you're there right now, I know how frustrating that is. You've already put thousands, maybe tens of thousands of words into this book. Months, years, maybe even decades. You've spent real time on this, real effort. And instead of feeling closer to the end, you feel farther away from it. But here's what I've noticed after years of working with writers stuck exactly where you might be right now. The middle usually isn't actually the problem. The middle is where the problem becomes visible. But it started earlier. It started in your foundation, in what you set up before you got to the muddy part. Think about it this way. The middle's whole job is to escalate what you already built at the beginning. It should raise the stakes, deepen the conflict, push your character closer to a breaking point. But your middle can only escalate what already exists. If your character's want is vague, if what's standing in their way isn't concrete, if your character doesn't have anything to lose, The middle has nothing to work with. There's no engine to rev. So when a writer tells me they're lost in the middle, one of the first places I look isn't the middle at all. It's back at the beginning. What does your character want? What happens if they don't get it? What's stopping them? If those answers are fuzzy, the middle will feel fuzzy too, no matter how many chapters you add. When writers talk to me about struggling with the middle, I hear some version of this again and again. I'm having trouble tying the chapters together to make one story instead of a series of individual stories. I'm having trouble linking gaps together and still making sure everything makes sense. Different words, same problem underneath. There's a real difference between chronicling what happens and building a story. Chronicling is when a lot of things happen, but there's no real cause and effect, no escalation of conflict or stakes. Everything that happens gets equal weight. This happened, then this happened, then this happened, and so on. It's accurate. It might even be interesting on a chapter by chapter basis, but you can have 20 interesting chapters and still feel like the story isn't going anywhere, because it isn't. Sometimes I see the opposite happening too. The story keeps repeating the same beat, just in a different chapter. The couple has the same fight they had in chapter 3, again in chapters 8, 14, 19, and 28. Maybe the location changes, maybe the dialogue changes, but has anything actually changed? This is usually where writers start trying to fill the gaps. Another chapter, another conversation, another obstacle, a new character, another subplot. One writer told me it's like she has the full feeling and vision of a scene, but the moment she goes to write it, it sprouts all kinds of spider legs growing in directions she never planned. But more things happening isn't necessarily what your middle needs. And this is exactly where the foundation shows up again. If the want and the stakes were clear from the start, escalation is almost automatic. If they weren't, no amount of added incident will make the middle feel like it's building toward anything. So what do you do when you're stuck? Here's what I want you to try. Don't ask yourself what should happen in the next chapter. That's a huge question. And when you're already stuck, it's not a particularly helpful question. Instead, go back to your last 3 chapters, just 3. And for each one, ask 2 questions. What changed? And what did that change cause? For example, let's say you have 2 business partners whose relationship is falling apart. In one chapter, they argue about the direction of the company. A few chapters later, they argue again, then another. Those might be really well-written chapters, but if nothing changes because of those arguments, the story isn't building, it's just repeating. Now, imagine they argue, and this time one partner decides she's done. And because she's leaving, she secretly starts moving key client accounts to a new venture. Her partner discovers what she's done, so he freezes the shared business account before she can take anything. Now, she can't fund the new venture she was planning to leave with. One thing created the next thing. Or let's say you have 2 siblings fighting over their late father's house. In one chapter, they argue about whether to sell it. A few chapters later, they argue again, then another. Same argument, but no rising stakes, no one actually doing anything. Now, imagine they argue, and this time one sibling decides he's done waiting. He lists the house without telling his sister. She finds out from a neighbor, so she files an injunction to stop the sale before it closes. Now, he can't sell the house he thought he already controlled. One thing created the next. There's a chain of events. So, before you tear your whole middle apart or start brainstorming 15 new chapters, Try that first. Go back 3 chapters and ask what changed and what that change caused. Did the stakes get more serious? You might be surprised what you find or what you don't find. And if you go back 3 chapters and can't find an answer there, don't stop there. Go back further. Go all the way back to your opening chapters and ask the same question about your character's want and the obstacle in front of them. That's usually where the real answer is waiting. But the middle isn't just where the structure gets hard. It's where the emotional experience of writing gets hard too. And I don't think that's a coincidence. By the time you're in the middle, the initial excitement of a new idea has usually worn off. You're not close enough to the end to feel that pull yet either. You're just in it. And after enough time staring at a story, you can't seem to move forward. Something else starts happening. You stop questioning the story and start questioning yourself. What starts as a story problem very quickly becomes a competence problem. Those are 2 very different things. And knowing that the story problem usually traces back to your foundation, not some flaw in your ability, that's one of the most useful things you can carry into the next writing session. Don't question yourself, question your story. All the answers you need are in those pages. So, if you've ever stared at Word 40,000 or 70,000, wondering if you've lost your way entirely, go back to your last 3 chapters. Ask what changed. Ask what that change caused. What did it set in motion? And if the answer is still fuzzy, go back further, back to what your character wants and what's standing in your character's way. Because the middle isn't something you fill, it's something you build. And what you're building with was set long before you reached the middle. You don't have to solve the whole Rubik's Cube. You just need to check if the bottom layer is actually put together. You didn't lose your way in the middle. You're just finally standing where you can see it. So stop trying to fill it and go back to what you built it on. That's where the real work, and I think the real fun, starts. So there you have it. Thanks for hanging out with me today. If you know any writers who need some support in their writing, please share this episode or the Writer Unleashed podcast in general. And if you love what you're listening to, subscribe on your favorite listening platform. And if you're listening on Apple, please leave me a review. Reading how this podcast impacts your writing truly lights me up and helps me create topics for the show. Till next time, keep writing, and I'll talk to you soon.